Today I'm going to be talking a little bit of a different video. I kind of wanted to just touch on why it's important to keep going as an artist. Now, I'm obviously a nobody. Nobody knows who I am. That doesn't mean that I do not have goals of becoming an artist full time. Now, I grew up in an environment where art wasn't necessarily a viable source of income, or at least a viable career. I ended up going into drafting, which I did pretty well in school. It was only a 2-year program, but art was always something that was that I did on the side. I got a little bit into photography, and that actually got me out of a depressive state that I was in, which we don't need to get into that. But fortunately, photography brought me out of that depressive state and into this more creative mindset, which was missing because I had to leave art behind. And as I started getting into photography, my creativity started to build, and I recognized that photography for me had a cap. For me, I wanted to create worlds that didn't exist in reality. And photography, while there are photographers that do or are capable of creating worlds out of nothing, I do think you're limited because you are just photographing. Now, you could say you can add Photoshop, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's not really photography. That's graphic design. But for me, I wanted to literally create worlds out of nothing. And I wasn't able to do that with photography. And so I went back into art. And when I went back into art, I came with a completely new perspective, and I fell in love with it all over again. Now, that was drawing. I was drawing a lot of sketches and using a lot of markers and that kind of style. By the way, when I say art, I mean drawing. Photography is art, by the way. But eventually, I got not necessarily tired of it, but there was a medium that I never really dove into, which was acrylic painting. And so around 2022, I wanted to start getting more into acrylic painting. And when I did that, it literally opened up a new world. I was terrible at it, but that did not stop me from continuing to pursue that route. And as I did that, the more and more I fell in love with painting, the more and more I started to emulate a lot of the painters that I looked up to during the time. And I was also following a lot of artists on Instagram, and they were just inspiring me like crazy. Like, for instance, there was this one painter, Ben Evans. I don't know if he'll ever see this video, but he's literally single-handedly elevated my painting skills to a whole new level. Just the imagination that he has, and he doesn't even do anything that crazy, but he does have this way of painting that actually makes it seem possible. Now, I know that may sound like an insult, but I promise you it's not. It's totally a compliment. Though his style is very campy, almost comes off as childish, but you can tell that he understands anatomy, understands lighting, shadows, and his approach to art just seemed fun. And in my previous videos, I kind of touch on this, but to me, art is about having fun at the end of the day. And that's what painting did for me. Drawing, I still love drawing. I still love using markers, but painting does something different. Painting is like this untapped skill that I'm constantly learning. Also, by the way, sorry about my voice, I'm sick. But back to the subject, it kind of reminded me of why it's important that a lot of the artists that I listened to continued, because a lot of the artists that I listened to almost had this phase where it almost seemed like their career was almost over. And I think what's so interesting is that a lot of these artists came from the ground up, right? They built themselves up. They didn't have the platform. They didn't have the access. They didn't have the resources to be in the faces and the ears of the listeners. They had to grind as hard as possible. And to me, that's really inspirational. And it makes me think, obviously, I'm not a musician, but I am an artist, and I do want people to see my work. That's why I share it. That's why I put it on Instagram. That's why I put it on TikTok, YouTube, because I want people to see it, because I feel like I have this really cool thing, and I'm like, hey guys, look at it. And a lot of the artists that I listen to are almost like that too. They have this acute sense of lyricism. They have a very talented bag of writing skills, and they want to share that with their peers, their contemporaries. And that's kind of what I want to do as well, but obviously using the platform or the art form of painting, telling narratives, telling references to things that I think maybe you guys would also recognize. It's just, to me, it's just this cool thing that I really want to share with everyone. And while I don't think that I'm a musician, I do think that we're in the same pot. I do think that we have similarities in the sense that we have this, kind of like I was saying before, we have this creative mindset, this creative talent that we want to share with the world. I don't need to go down a list of artists that tell their stories and relate to their fans, because we all know that's what musicians do. I just think, like, imagine if a lot of the artists that we listen to thought they were speaking into the void and telling their stories to no one and just gave up. And now we don't have a JPEG Mafia. Now we don't have an Andre 3000 or Outkast. Now we don't have I was going to say Kanye. Yikes. Now we don't have Death Grips, right? We wouldn't have these artists because it was difficult, but they gave up. Imagine if they did that. We wouldn't have a lot of these cool artists. So I just think that if you are a creative, I do think it's so important to just keep going, because you never know. You never know what your art's going to do to people. You don't never know how it's going to impact people. And just like that, this piece is done. This is probably one of my favorite pieces. But I have so many ideas I want to share with you guys. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you want to follow my journey, stick around. Go ahead and hit that subscribe, But yeah, see you in the next one.